I'm Vamp, and this is a guide on how to approach Mythic Spellblade Aluriel as a Holy Paladin. This guide assumes that you have a rough understanding of the encounter on Mythic difficulty, and that you are also familiar with the Holy Paladin. Bear in mind that this guide is built from my own experience of the encounter, and there can be subtle differences from guild to guild. For this encounter, I have chosen the following talents. The only tier worth discussing here is tier 6, where I've chosen Sanctified Wrath instead of Judgment of Light. And this is because of phase 1 in particular, where I feel we're often spending so much of our time pumping out heals that we just do not have the spare global cooldowns to keep a consistent uptime of Judgment of Light on the boss. Sanctified Wrath is great here regardless, as there is a large focus on spot healing. Also, if you are not comfortable taking Aura of Sacrifice, then Aura of Mercy is also completely fine, though Sacrifice is incredibly potent on this encounter for phase 3 in particular. Starting off with phase 1, we have the Master of Frost. From a healing point of view in general, this is by far the most healing intensive phase of the encounter, so do not be too alarmed if it burns a fair amount of your mana in order to progress through it. We're going to want to keep our beacons on the tanks for the full duration of the encounter, and that will usually be enough to babysit them, but do be conscious that during Annihilate they will be taking large spikes of damage. Phase 1 is all about efficiently rotating the Marks of Frost and keeping them alive. Due to our tanky nature, there is a very likely chance that we will be chosen as one of the Mark Soakers, like I am in this video. If this is the case for you as well, simply always be conscious of when you need to drop your mark and use Divine Protection and Shield as and when needed. Our sole purpose during this phase is to keep the mark targets alive, which we are perfect for with our potent spot healing. Depending on your healing composition and strategy, you will most likely be tasked with keeping 2 of the 4 marks alive. All you need to keep in mind is the obvious. As the stacks on the mark targets increases, the more damage they will take, so as they are approaching 10 stacks, be sure to even precast into them to ensure the damage they take does not take you by surprise. A great tip for this phase, especially if your positioning is similar to my guild's, in that you can often be out of range of the other 2 marks as you are stuck in your soaking position, is the use of Rule of Law. If the marks that you are assigned to are looking great, but you see things on the other side are looking rough, then feel free to pop it and throw a few emergency heals over. I lost count of the amount of times I saved a mark from dying during progression by keeping an eye on them and reacting accordingly. As I've already mentioned, this phase can be incredibly taxing on your mana pool, so do not be scared to use a fair amount of it to help your raid through this phase, but also bear in mind that you're going to have to survive another full round of this phase again later on. As this phase is so healing intensive, we'll be looking to make good use of our cooldowns. Wings will pretty much guarantee anyone we touch gets to live, so it only makes sense we want to use it sometime during this phase, though that will depend entirely on when our Aura Mastery is set to be used. In this example, my Aura Mastery is assigned for orb detonations in phase 3, which occurs at around 3 minutes and 10 seconds into the encounter, meaning I can make use of my wings at any point in the first minute and 10 seconds. The same can be said for Holy Avenger, where we can even use 2 applications of it before Aura Mastery if we choose to use it directly at the start to help with DPS. Though it's completely up to you. I personally like to link Holy Avenger with wings, meaning I'll hold it, though that can also be considered overkill, and it's more than acceptable to spread out the 2 cooldowns during the phase if you'd rather slightly less power but a wider spread of coverage. Again, test it out and see what works for you and your guild. Moving on to phase 2, the Master of Fire, we have a pretty simplistic phase healing wise, with only a couple of mechanics to look out for. We want to keep in mind that the Marks of Frost from phase 1 will briefly carry over into this phase, so give those players special attention. For phase 2, we want to keep our eyes on players targeted by Seer and Brand, as the charge from Spellblade on those targets deals a high amount of damage on Mythic difficulty, so we'll want to react accordingly to avoid them dying from the dot afterwards. Once the brands have detonated around the room, there's a good chance we may be assigned to stun one of the fire elementals that spawn, as we have a reliable 6-second stun with Hammer of Justice. So if you are assigned, then make sure to be in position to do so. Once the elementals are out, there will be a fairly large amount of pulsing AoE on the raid. If your Aura Mastery is assigned for this moment, then go for it, but otherwise allow whatever throughputs are set for this phase to do their thing, and prepare yourself to go big in phase 3. Any elementals that are allowed to get a cast through will most likely drop their target to critical HP, so be ready to react. Phase 3, the Master of Arcane, is an incredibly short phase where we'll be looking to put our Aura Mastery, especially if we've taken Aura of Sacrifice, to fantastic use. At the start of the phase, the only real damage to look out for is splash damage from raid members standing where orbs spawn, and when your raid gets into position to move together for the detonations, this is where we'll want to be alert for Fell Lash, as not only does this deal a large amount of damage even if the entire raid helps to soak it, but we'll also want the raid topped as we start moving. During the detonation is where our Aura Mastery with Sacrifice will do a ridiculous amount of work. The raid's total HP is going to bounce up and down like no tomorrow, especially if you're not using a Spirit Link totem, leaving a lot of opportunity for sacrifice to apply very effective and relevant healing to the raid. As mentioned earlier, this is where I like to have my cooldowns line up to help make the aura mastery as potent as possible. Some may consider it overkill, but I prefer to look at it as insurance. I should also note that I like to use my Divine Shield here so that I can just turret heal as the raid takes a beating. Once the detonations are over and the arcane elementals are out, there is very little to no damage on the raid, leaving you a great opportunity to drink a later on potion if you feel you'll need that much extra mana for the repeat phases coming up, or you can just help out with damage. The encounter will then reset back to phase 1, and we will need to go through the motions again. The only difference I consider in terms of playstyle during the second run through is my cooldown usage, where I will monitor how our healing team is doing in terms of mana and plan accordingly. If, for example, the 2 healers assigned to the Marks of Frost that I am not assigned to are beginning to run dry on mana, instead of holding Holy Avenger to use with Wings, I may pop it as it comes off cooldown and help give those healers some breathing space. This concludes both my approach to healing Spellblade Aluriel on Mythic difficulty, and also my first ever encounter-specific Holy Paladin walkthrough. Initially, I was asked if I could try an encounter-specific guide, and I sat here for a while, not really sure how I would approach it. But I figured the best way would be just to do what I personally feel may be useful, and see what you all think. So by all means, this is like the test subject, if you will. Any sort of feedback would be fantastic, such as, would you rather I focused more on detail in general? Did I talk too much about areas that didn't need to be talked about? Or were there aspects even that I didn't talk about at all that you feel would be important? Drop anything in the comments below and I'll get back to you when I can. I wish you the best of luck against Spellblade Aluriel, and thank you for watching. Until next time, I'll see you guys later.